in 2018, before we made the decision to withdraw from the Human Rights Council, we had gone in and put forward a very, very modest package of reforms, and we had been asking our partners to vote against this win-win China human rights resolution. Our partners refused to even do the slightest things to address some of the most egregious problems with the Human Rights Council, including dumb stuff that it was doing that caused it to run out of money every year. We're like, can we at least fix some of these things so that, it's not running out of money every year and we don't have to turn around and like write additional checks at the end of the year because they've mismanaged their agenda so badly? Can we also like do a couple of small things so that we only have like maybe one anti-Israel session instead of 3, which, was the norm at the time? I mean, can we just like keep it all in one instead of having it spread out across 3? It's really small, minor things that we thought everybody agreed needed to happen. And I'll tell you something that I haven't really publicly said much. I got more cooperation from the Palestinian representative in Geneva than I did from my European friends on these things. They were like more open to some of this stuff than the Palestinians, which was shocking to me. Yeah, it was like that. And so then when they all refused to join us in voting against this Chinese resolution, literally, if it had not been for the United States calling the vote and voting no, this thing would have passed by acclamation. It would have been, some of them abstained, some of them voted for it, but none of them voted against it with us. We were the only ones. And I came back from Geneva and I said to Nikki, I'm like, you know what? I'm done. I tried. I left it all on the table. This team that we've been working with has been great. We've done everything we can, but this is irredeemable. If you feel like you want to pull the plug, go right ahead. Be my guest. I'm not going to argue with you anymore, because I had been, we had been having this back and forth about what is the value of staying in? Do we need to stay in to fight China, to fight other bad actors? And at that point, it's like, if we can't do it by ourselves, and if our allies are not willing to stand up to this, they need to understand that we're not just going to let them hide behind our skirts on this stuff all day. And so actually what happened after we left is these countries had to take these things up themselves. And they found out that they missed us, actually. And so I think there was an opportunity when the Biden administration came in to try to use that the fact that these countries did miss the United States to leverage some of the changes. Again, little things that we were asking for them to do. But of course, they didn't do that. Instead, it looks like they got taken to the cleaners by the Europeans, because they've recently come out and said that they're not going to run for a second term, even though they could. I think also this is due to their concern that they might actually lose a vote in the Human Rights Council because of our stalwart defense of our ally Israel. And so again, this body, it lives in the upside down too. And I at a certain point, it loses pretty much any credibility to talk about human rights if they're going to spend all their time bashing Israel and only Israel, and refuse to even have a discussion about the Office of the High Commissioner's report finding that there's evidence of crimes against humanity committed by the People's Republic of China. And you can't even get that to come up for a vote. It's ridiculous.
So my question is, how did this happen? Because as I understand, the UN is mostly funded by the US. Why is the whole system so on board with China and kind of hostile to the...
Well, this didn't happen overnight. And I think that the system has been pretty hostile to the United States, because if you think about the General Assembly in particular, it's like the world's, it's like the parliament for the world. But most of the members of this parliament don't make any financial contribution to the United Nations, or make very little financial contributions. You have a large group in the G77, which has actually got 135 countries in it. And a lot of these countries, they see this as an opportunity to take a free shot at the United States and for them, for a lot of these countries, the United States just embodies this kind of system that they feel repressed by, even though whether it's the colonial past or neoliberalism or whatever you want to call it, they don't really have a very logical or articulate explanation for why they feel so oppressed by the United States, considering we haven't colonized any of them except the Philippines, who doesn't seem too upset about that. But it's really, the United States, because the United States is the kind of the unipower, we were the only superpower after the Cold War. I think that all of these countries that their whole identity in a lot of ways is just wrapped up in this kind of anti-colonial, anti-imperial narrative that they use as an excuse for why they aren't succeeding, to be frank, in a lot of context. So I think that there's a complicated mix of all of that that's operating in the background, and then of course our stalwart defense of the state of Israel has been a point that a lot of member states in the United Nations have taken issue with, and they see votes in the General Assembly. They see other things as an opportunity to push back on the United States. And then China has very skillfully taken these dynamics and aligned themselves with the G77, aligned themselves with this anti-colonial narrative, this anti-imperial narrative, and made themselves align themselves with the developed world, the developing world, and said, we're here with you in Global South solidarity, and we're part of the developing world. And it's they've been very skillful in doing that. At the same time, they want to be treated like a great power or a superpower by maintaining their seat on the Security Council, by throwing their weight around inside the institutions where that matters. And then they've been very strategic in terms of how they deploy their resources at the United Nations. For instance, China gives almost nothing in voluntary contributions, whereas the United States gives huge amounts. We give $18 billion a year to the United Nations, all spigots, which means that across all agencies, funds, programs, everything the United Nations does, and across all of the ways that the United States contributes, it's $18 billion a year. We are exponentially the largest contributor, but we have never really, if anything, we have used the United Nations, we've kind of positioned ourselves within the UN system as that it's a constraining, especially since the end of the Cold War, we've allowed the UN to constrain us, and then we take a lot of heat when we don't operate within these constraints that the U.S. voluntarily submits itself to inside the United Nations.